All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, did the Easter Bunny come over the weekend? Did you get heaps of Easter eggs, or...?
I only got one, actually, but and I think that was one that my grandkids didn't actually want, Jake, so they let me have it.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to eat too many, do I? Because...
you got to be careful, hey?
You have. But no, it was a great weekend in rugby terms, and both hemispheres actually record crowds in Super League and record crowds in the NRL. What a great weekend it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. No,
and there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess working in this industry, mate, it's probably one of the very few industries where you have to work over the Easter weekend.
Yeah.
I imagine you were quite busy on Sunday.
Busy on Easter Sunday. Yeah, well, that's just that's just what it's like, isn't it? But it's a small price to have to pay, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. All right, mate. Well, let's get into some of the matchups that took place over the weekend, and there were some really good contests. We'll start on Thursday night. Wakefield defeating Castleford 13 points to 12.
Yes, I was there at that game, and in corporate hospitality, it's a great. I would say now Wakefield is a great place to go, particularly if you're going for corporate hospitality before the game. It's a wonderful facility that they've got there, and great value for money, I must say too, and a great atmosphere, and it was actually a really tight game as well, of course. Just 12-0 at half-time. Castleford scored 3 tries. Rowan Milnes, who I've got a great deal of time for as a halfback for Castleford. Unfortunately for him, the 3 tries were all scored fairly wide out, and too wide out for him to kick the goal. And Wakefield came back in the second half to level up with 2 converted tries to make it 12-all before Mason Leno kicked one of the lowest ever drop goals that just crept over the crossbar to win the game. And I thought Castleford were unlucky. I mean, obviously they scored 3 tries to 2. Castleford don't look a million miles away from being a decent side. But, the problem is that, when you're a side that's struggling near the bottom of the table, you often don't have a great deal of luck, and Castleford didn't have that much of it really. But it was a fine game, and I do get the feeling that they will start getting better. I mean, the thing that they needed prior to last week's game was to strengthen up their middles, and they did that, didn't they? With getting 2 players on board, Hugo Slabio and Jordan Desaria, two French guys, and it seemed to work to me. They did look a bit stronger in the middle, and they could so easily have won that game, couldn't they? And great to see Jason Gary back and scoring 2 tries. He's a player I love to watch. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, a winger, his greatest asset is pace, and Jason Gary's got it in bucketfuls. He's a terrific young bloke, and scored 2 great tries. I thought, 2 tries very well created by Rowan Milnes. I think Rowan Milnes has got one of the strongest kicking games near to the opponent's line in the whole of Super League, and he actually created 2 tries, one for Sam Wood and one for Gary, with brilliant kicks that the Tigers players were able to take. So, hopefully things are on the improve for them.
And when you were at the ground, I remember watching at home the Dejan Assi drop goal attempt right at the end of the match. I couldn't tell whether it was going to go in or not. He got he struck it really well, and it looks like it just sort of missed. But at the ground, did you think it had gone over?
Well, it's impossible to say, because you're side on, and you couldn't quite see it. I thought it certainly went very close, and all the Wakefield fans were immensely relieved when it was not
sweaty
given.
Palms around.
Although I think actually most of them would have really enjoyed a golden point period as well.
Yeah.
So, but I think another thing, just another point to make about that game. I've said before on this podcast that Thursday night games for me are very important in terms of television. Because Thursday leads into the weekend, you want, and because there's potentially a very big audience on a Thursday night, because usually there's no football being shown on Sky. So it's a great opportunity to show off the game, and it's great to see a game where the stadium looks really full, which obviously it did on Thursday night. It makes a big change from going to somewhere like Salford or Huddersfield or whatever. And, I've said before that local derbies are the ideal Thursday night games. And again, the Wakefield Castleford game showed it. There were, a good contingent of Castleford fans there who gave great support to their side, and that's what we need on a Thursday night.
And I mean, if you look at like the fixtures list, all they need to do is schedule one local derby every week on the Thursday.
Wouldn't be difficult.
Doesn't matter who the other teams play, but if you just had one every week,
yeah, it wouldn't be difficult, would it?
Yeah,
no,
that's right. The other one too, Wakefield getting a win at home, which is nice to see.
The first win this season at home. It's a bit of a monkey off their back, and it keeps them, up with the leaderboard, I suppose you might say. I think where are they now? They're in 8th place, just behind the Catalans, but well positioned, 8 points from 8 games. And they've had a fairly tough fixture list, Jake. It's not been an easy fixture list for Wakefield. So to get 8 points from 8 games in the way they've done it so far, I think before the season started they would have been happy, with that as a promoted club. Unfortunately, Castleford are down. I mean, there are 3 teams. We'll talk about the other 2, Salford and Huddersfield, but 3 teams now on 2 points, 6 behind the rest, and it's looking like a 9-team competition now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You see John Keir on Thursday night, mate?
I did. Yes, John was the MC for the game in the corporate sector, and gave a very entertaining introduction to the game and talked about it and so on, and then at the end. As well. So, yes, he was great, but, great to see him again, and unfortunately he's not here today with us, but, great, he does very well for Wakefield. He's a regular there for their corporate events, and, he's a very... He's a very wise guy when it comes to rugby league. Although not wise in one sense. We'll come on to a point in a short while where he got it wrong. But
that's right. Move on to the Good Friday matchups. We had the Hull derby. Hull KR defeating Hull FC 28 points to 14. A great contest, this one, considering Hull FC were a man down for most of the match.
From about the 15th minute, Cade Cust going off with that, collision with the head of Arthur Morg. It was a very difficult one, wasn't it? Because it was such a high-speed collision, and I don't think there was any malice in it whatsoever by Cade Cust. I don't think he could have easily avoided. I mean, he obviously should have pulled out, and of course, I don't think you could really argue with the red card because it was a straight-on clash with Arthur Morg's head. Morg was knocked to the ground, and initially I thought, gosh, that he is bound to be off for the whole game. But it was quite remarkable that he came back on again. He passed his head injury assessment, which was quite remarkable, I think, really, and which shows that different people have different levels of ability to sustain a head bump. It's not a constant thing, is it? That problem. But he came back again, scored a try before half time, was nominated as man of the match after the game, and was interviewed on Sky. Was clearly not concussed. There's no question about it. So and actually, I must say, he's also learned to speak English very well.
Yeah.
which is very useful now that he's playing with Hull KR.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Oh, there's a lot to be lost in translation, especially with an Australian accent at coach, mate.
But I must say, at the Hull KR press conference on Tuesday, Willie Peters spoke incredibly highly of Arthur Morg and said, I sort of said, what made you sign Arthur in particular? And he said, well, whenever we played Catalans and he was in the side, he always gave us loads of trouble. So, he could see his quality, and he swooped when he became available.
Yeah. And I guess you look at Hull FC, I mean, like we said, I think the scoreline doesn't reflect how good of a contest it really was, but God, it looks like they're building into a really good side this year, doesn't it?
Well, there were some late tries that Ofahengaue scored that stretched the margin out a bit. But, yes, I think Hull FC, I mean, they're now in 4th place, aren't they? But again, that would have been a dream last year, wouldn't it, for them? It would have been an absolute dream. And they're playing well. They're still looking out for new recruits and so on. So I think, I think they'll continue to go well, although we'll be talking a bit later about the games this weekend. They've got Wigan coming for the second time this season, which is crazy, really. But we'll talk about that a bit later, Jake.
Moving on to the next Good Friday matchup, we had the Wigan Saints derby. Wigan winning that one 24 points to 14.
Yeah, and this was where John did get it wrong because, we had this, the previous week, George Whitby had played against Wakefield and had a really great game. But John was convinced that Jonny Lomax would be back in the side for the Wigan game. But actually, Paul Whelan stuck with George Whitby. And George Whitby, to me, looks like a pretty permanent fixture now in the St Helens side. Although St Helens didn't win, you couldn't pin the blame on him, certainly. And he looks a very, very confident young man, and he's not just a good player, but he's a good organiser on the field. If you watched him closely, he's not afraid. I mean, he's only, I think, 18 or 19. I'm not quite sure. Still a teenager, but he was not afraid to tell all the vastly more experienced players all around him what to do and where to go and how to line up and so on. He's absolutely, a real young superstar potentially. And I don't know whether you saw his interview after the game with Jenna Brooks, but he came across as a very, very confident young man. A lot of kids of that age are really shy when it comes to being interviewed, aren't they? But not young Mr. Whitby. He's got a lot of self-confidence, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah.
And I hope we're going to see him for many years to come.
Yeah, he was just so lively in that interview, wasn't he? He spoke really well.
He did. It looks as though he's about 12, doesn't he, actually?
Yeah. He'll age well then.
Yeah.
And it's great to see when you do see like a young player like him giving those marching orders to his troops, because I think with the West Tigers at the moment, with Lachlan Galvin, I watched one of their pre-season documentaries they did around that, and the big thing they were trying to get out of Lachlan Galvin was to find those qualities where he had that confidence to march some of the older players around and trying to get him to find his voice.
Yeah.
Because, some people are natural-born leaders. They do have those qualities from birth, but, some you need to coach it into, and it's great to see Whitby's got those qualities.
Yes, he doesn't need coaching. It doesn't need them coaching into him, does he, at all?
But I guess looking forward, what does Paul Wellens do now? Do you think he'll bring Lomax back into his side this weekend? And if he doesn't, what's Lomax do? Is he just going to be happy sitting on the sideline?
Well, Jonny Lomax, I think Johnny's 34 now, if I'm correct. So is getting to that stage of his career where you start thinking about the future and what he's going to do. I think Jonny Lomax is an absolute rugby league tragic. From being a child, his love of rugby league is really incredible. And I've got not the slightest doubt that Jonny Lomax will, at some point, maybe in the not too distant future, move into coaching and will ultimately be a very, very good coach indeed. So I think that's Jonny Lomax's future. How soon it comes is difficult to say, but obviously if there's a young player on the block who's challenging you and potentially pushing you out, then maybe that change will come sooner rather than later. Who knows? But I think Jonny Lomax has still got a lot to offer, and let's not rule out the fact that it only takes one injury to a player for Jonny Lomax to be straight back in the side. And actually, he might actually benefit from 2 or 3 weeks on the sidelines to get his body back into match day conditions. So, because it's a squad game, isn't it? Really, it's it's not just the 13 who are picked to start or the 17 on the match day. There's at least a 25-man squad that you need to cover for all eventualities. So the idea that Jonny won't be in the team anymore, I think, is probably quite far-fetched.
Yeah, and I think Paul Wellens finds himself in a little bit of a difficult situation at the moment because he's sort of been forced to play Sadler at fullback due to some of the defensive lapses we've seen when he's been defending in the line.
Yeah.
So obviously they've switched him and Wellesby, and just be interesting to see what he decides to do going forward because it seems to be working a little bit better for him with Sadler at the back.
It does,
defensively,
doesn't it?
Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll keep our eyes peeled on the squad list.
Saints could have won that game, couldn't they? It wasn't. They went 18-2 down, but then came back to 18-14, and then Wigan finished them off with a late try to Abbas Miski on 78 minutes. So that made the final score 24-14. But it was certainly close enough to make you think that Saints are very competitive this year.
No, definitely. The third and final match-up on Good Friday, we had Leeds defeating Huddersfield 28 points to 6.
Well, only 6-0 at half-time. I thought, Huddersfield had some very inexperienced players in their squad. I think they were giving debuts to two guys off the bench, if I can find the details here. Let me just have a look. I've got the wrong page there, but who were they? They were Archie Sykes and Jacob Algar. Both made their debuts off the bench for Huddersfield. Leeds had a stronger side out, but they didn't have it all their own way. Although they pulled away, in the latter stages of the game, and were always going to win comfortably. But again, Huddersfield are just one of those sides that's had the most appalling luck with injuries, as we all know, and it's very difficult to know why that is really. I mean, obviously, bad luck is the main thing, but you sort of do think that if they can ever put a reasonably strong side out, with squad numbers 1 to 13, then they might do quite well. But it looks like it's a long way off, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also, I mean, you look at their depth at the moment, you just kind of feel like maybe their recruitment could have been a little bit better over the off-season and last year, but maybe that's something they can try and improve going forward.
Yeah, well, the thing is, quite a few of the players they've recruited have not been playing much.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Well, that's right. I mean, Noel Edwards, lose him in the first
just
match.
So unlucky, yes.
But, hey, Leeds are looking pretty good as well.
Leeds are back to being challengers, aren't they? And, they... I actually think Brad Arthur will probably go home. From what he said in recent press conferences, I think he's actually very homesick to be with his family, which is perfectly understandable. But I think it would be a shame for Leeds to lose him because, as we said last week with John Keir, he's the best coach they've had since Brian McDermott. And, for Leeds to have to then find somebody else from next season would be quite a challenge for them, but no doubt they'd bring the right guy in. But I think they'd rather remain with Brad.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it'd be great if he does leave to find someone who's committed long term and can hopefully get them on the up. But
absolutely
doing well this year. Saturday's matchups, we had Leigh defeating Warrington. 18 points to 14. I had
18 points to 14. Yes, and fairly comfortable win for Leigh, really. I thought, Jake. Warrington, it was 18-2, but Warrington made the scoreline look quite a bit better with 2 tries to King and Ashton on 62 and 69 minutes. But they never looked to me as though they were going to snatch a victory. And this puts Warrington out of the top 6, which is very disappointing at this stage of the season for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for Sam Burgess. Sam, obviously, the problem they have, the one player in Super League who you would least want to get injured if you were a Super League coach is George Williams. And George Williams has been injured. He's going to be out for several weeks now. I'm not absolutely sure how long it will be. But that poses an enormous problem for Sam Burgess because George is such an influential player. And how do you replace George Burgess? Well, the obvious thing to do was to put young Oliver Leyland into the side, but he didn't do that. Instead, he moved Danny Walker from hooker to standoff, and put Sam Powell in as the starting hooker. And I mean, Danny Walker, obviously, to step into George Williams' shoes is not the easiest thing in the world, is it really? Let's face it. And then to have to combine with Mark Sneed, who's got the other half-back role, you can't suddenly practice that in a match, can you, really? So it was very difficult, I thought. And a lot of journalists after the game asked Sam why he'd gone with Danny at standoff and not brought Ollie Leyland in. And Sam seemed reluctant to sort of talk about that point. And I noticed this week in the 21-man squad for the St Helens game on Thursday night, Ollie Leyland isn't even in the 21-man squad. Right. So, I don't know whether he's injured or what the situation is with him.
Was he on loan with Widnes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because...
yes, he did play at the weekend.
Because it makes you think, because it's hard when you put those two in the halves, to like Walker and Sneed, because Sneed's been there, 3 or 4 matches now?
Yes.
The only reason why, I guess, that combination with Williams was working so well is because Williams obviously knows the system, but they're both very professional players and have a lot of experience in the halves. But when you mix a hooker with someone who's been there for 3 or 4 matches, you're probably bound to have a bit of a scrappy game.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. And I thought Lachlan Lamb was absolutely outstanding for Leigh. Lachlan Lamb is an absolutely brilliant player as far as I'm concerned, and again, great games for Edwin Apapi, and another very strong game for Ethan O'Neill, and I think if you're talking about somebody who is the signing of the season, who is the smartest signing of the season, I think Ethan O'Neill at Leigh is a very strong contender because, frankly, I'd never heard of him before he came to this country. Played in the Queensland Cup, didn't he?
Yep. Yeah.
But obviously he's got great DNA because he's Julian O'Neill's son. But he came completely unheralded, and yet I think he's playing outstandingly well for Leigh. And I suspect, I always remember, wise words that Gary Hetherington once said to me many years ago. In a salary cap sport, the way to succeed is to sign players who play above their salary cap value. And I can only imagine that Ethan O'Neill is not on a very high salary at Leigh, but whatever salary he's on, I think he's probably playing well above it.
Yeah,
and that's the art of managing a side on a salary cap sport. But, the players who are on enormous salaries sometimes don't live up to those salaries, and it's a double whammy then, isn't it? Because your salary cap is being wasted in effect.
I mean, talk about a side that has got their recruitment right. We talk about Ethan O'Neill, Isaac Liu, David Armstrong. They've all had a massive impact on that side this year.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, Armstrong was rested from half time in this game, and he still looks a bit gaunt to me. He had that strange sort of viral illness about a month ago that kept him out of 1 or 2 games. And he seemed to lose quite a lot of weight and came back looking quite thin and gaunt. And I still think he's looking a bit, not as though probably needs to put on a couple of pounds just to look a bit stockier.
Because he's always been quite a thin player as well. It probably didn't help that he had that illness.
No, probably not. No, but he's such a talented player and so good to watch. But I think Adrian Lamb took him off at half time. I think was it a groin problem he had, or so I can't quite remember now. But some problem that was he was in obvious pain when you saw him in the first half, and I think Adrian Lamb was very smart to take him off the field and give him a rest. And I don't know whether he's going to be playing this week or not. But another player, by the way, who I'm constantly impressed by. Well, 2 other young players actually. that Leigh signed. It's not just overseas signings who have done very well for them, but one player who's been there a long time, Kearnan, is doing very well for them. And this young Bailey Hodgson has forced his way into the team and is now a regular selection. You know, and that's they're doing really well, I think.
Because I mean, we were all quite worried last year towards the end of the season when Hull FC were poaching all these Leigh players. We thought, yeah, Leigh might be a bottom three side this season,
gosh.
but yeah, they've proved us all
nothing
wrong.
like it. No, nothing. I don't think I was that worried actually, but some people
Maybe
were
just
certainly. Some people, but certainly. Having said that, I don't think that many people thought that they'd have instant success in the way that they have. I mean, it all started with that 1-0 win at Wigan, of course, first game of the season, and they've gone on really well, apart from one or two blips since then. And I think, as Adrian Lamb said the other day, at this stage of the season last year, they only had 2 points, I think. Whereas, this season they're right up near the top. They're in third place with 11 points from 8 games. So, they're very, very handily positioned.
All right, we'll move on to the final matchup of the weekend, mate. We had Catalans defeating Salford 38 points to 10. Yeah,
well, that was the most predictable result of the weekend, wasn't it? Unfortunately. Again, a very much weakened Salford side with lots of lone players and so on. And Catalans went 16 points up in no time at all, and you knew at that point that the game was effectively over. Luke Keary had probably his best game for the Catalans, but the great thing about the game was the hat-trick for Tommy Makinson, which took him past the 1,500 points mark for his career. Wow. Which is a great thing for him. But, Salford, what was amazing really was that Salford still had a lot of fans there, and they made a cacophony of noise from beginning to end of the game, didn't they? They never shut up. They were marvellous, actually, and Salford did reward them with 2 late tries, and one of them, the first one, was actually scored by young, what's his name, Johnny Vaughan, the kid who's on loan from St Helens, who will apparently be joining Wigan next year. And that was created by a breakdown field by Tiaki Chan. And it was a wonderful try, absolutely fantastic try. Our try of the week, in fact, in League Express. And then Chan scored himself. And, he signed for Wigan at the end of the 2023 season, and has only played twice for Wigan. And you sort of I've written, actually, I don't know if you've read my column this week, but I've written about several young players, and I think sometime you would hope that he would get a chance at Wigan, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he, when he plays? You can always notice when he's on the field, and
Absolutely.
just to keep showing up every week, considering what's happening off the field. I think,
Absolutely,
yeah, tremendous effort from Chan. What a player. But why don't we touch on some of the other players you mentioned in your column that impressed you over the weekend, Martyn, because there was a few that had some pretty great performances.
Well, some great performances, but I actually started with a tragic incident, really, which was Jordan Burns of Whitehaven, who suffered a terrible injury in the second minute of the Cumbrian derby against Workington, shattered his cheekbone and eye socket in several places, and had to go to hospital. And the tragic thing was, we put 2 photos in League Express. One of him coming onto the field looking really happy with his 2 young sons holding both hands, and then 3 minutes later him going off the field looking absolutely devastated with this shocking injury. And it just sort of indicates, doesn't it, how cruel rugby league can be as a sport, really, to be honest. And, and what sometimes players have to go through as they, give us the entertainment that we all enjoy so much. So my best wishes to Jordan Burns. I hope he, recovers as quickly as possible, and that hopefully by now he's had the necessary surgery, and that he's cheekbones, back in place and so on. And I was so sorry to see that story. But apart from that, I mentioned George Whitby. We've already talked about him. Lewis Dodd, I mentioned because Lewis played for South Sydney on Good Friday against Canterbury in front of more than 65,000 people at Accor Stadium. And it was his debut for South Sydney. Unfortunately, he didn't get on until I think it was the 57th minute, by which time Canterbury were already 26-0 ahead. So, he wasn't going to win the game for them, was he? Let's put it that way. But in that short period on the pitch, I thought he acquitted himself quite well. He won a goal line dropout with a very smartly calibrated grubber to the Canterbury line. So I would give him a pass mark on that first display. But having said that, I noticed that he's not in the South's matchday 17 for this weekend's game. So Wayne Bennett obviously isn't yet convinced that Lewis is going to get them out of trouble.
It's probably a smart way to introduce him to his debut game, you might say, because either way, no matter what happened in that match, the blame wasn't going to be put on him for that loss. Whereas if he had started,
yes, it
there'd
might
be a
have
lot
been.
of talk about.
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah.
So maybe a blessing in disguise for him.
And since the game, apparently he's been interviewed on Fox Sports over there, and they asked him, "Do you have any regrets about coming?" And he said, "No, none whatsoever." And he's, I think he will make it in the end. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how he develops over there.
Yeah. Well, if anything, all that competition, it's only going to make him a better player. Being coached by Wayne Bennett as well, you can't get much better in terms of coaching.
Yeah. The other guys I mentioned, Cade Cuss, we've already talked about. Tommy Makinson, we've mentioned. Jason Gary, and Tiaki Chan. So, we've covered most of the guys that I mentioned in the column. But I also mentioned Christian Wade, this guy who plays for Gloucester at Rugby Union at the moment, the ex-England player, who spent several years in the NFL trying to break into the NFL. Didn't quite, never made an appearance actually in the NFL, but played quite a lot for in practice NFL games. Came back this year to join Gloucester in the Rugby Union Premiership, and looks. He's got the one thing that wingers need above all else, which is great pace. And if you actually look at his highlights reel, this year he scored 3 tries against Bristol and looked very sharp. So apparently he's going to join Wigan in June, we think, after the Rugby Union season ends. And I think he'll be really interesting. He is 33, coming on 34, so he's not a young guy anymore, but I think from looking at his highlight reel, he's certainly retained his pace, and he seems a very engaging guy. So I think he'll be an asset to Wigan, and we'll see whether he's in the Wigan side, come later in the season.
Because you'd almost say he's a high-profile signing. What impact do you think, having someone like him from Union coming to our sport will have? Do you think it'll attract a few Union
Well, you never know.
To see how he goes?
If we are going to attract Union guys, then it'll be the wingers who we attract, because it's easier for them to transition than it would be for any other player. So I think that might happen, and I'm sure there are probably quite a lot of good wingers in the Union game who we would welcome into rugby league. I don't follow it very closely these days, but I think it'll be interesting to see, won't it? And and there is a certain degree of there's the potential now for players to go back and forth between the two codes if that's what they want to do.
And look, any chance to make a little bit of extra money, keep him fit over the off season, he could always go back to Union for the start of next season.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we might be starting a trend.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
Now, mate, the other big news is, you correctly predicted it last week on the podcast, the crowd attendance, the aggregate crowd attendance record has been broken.
Yes, 86,010, I think it was, wasn't it, altogether? 3,000 more than the number that was attracted 2 years ago. And, that's great, isn't it? 86,080. Yeah. That shows progress. As I say, one of the things that annoys me is when people say, well, rugby league is really struggling in England. Well, the figures don't suggest that it is, because, there were some, quite decent crowds in some of the non-Super League games as well. And there's a lot going on in rugby league in England that's really quite exciting. And, so this idea that we're going to be begging the Australians, what we need is more money in the game. That's the thing that's lacking. But in other respects, the game is in a very healthy state. And, it's just that we don't seem to be able to make it pay at the moment. But having said that, Jake, we're not the only sport that's in that boat. I mean, Leeds United recently, for example, they've just been promoted into the Premiership from the Football League Championship, and yet they reported a £60 million loss last year, which is more than, the combined losses. Well, it's about double the combined losses in the whole of rugby league, and that's just one club that's going up into the Premiership. The fact is that you can, if you've got people with very deep pockets, then they can afford to stand those losses, can't they? And the crucial thing is to have people who are prepared to bear those losses for the sake of the club. And obviously Leeds United do have those people on their board of directors. But, some rugby league clubs like Salford don't have, unfortunately.
That's the key, is just keep making sure the on-field action is entertaining, competitive.
Absolutely.
And then, come the next TV deal, try and, double it if we can to get some more money coming.
Well, we've got to get we've got to get several broadcasters interested in broadcasting the game. That's the thing that the people who run the game, or IMG, if they're still involved, that's what they have to try and do. There's no two ways about it. That if you've only got one bidder, then you're in trouble, aren't you?
Absolutely. You need to create a competitive market.
Absolutely.
You sort of lead me into my next point, mate. Salford. Do we have any further information, and what's the latest there? I heard the council have said they're not going to give them any more financial support.
No, the council won't give them any more financial support because they're struggling themselves financially. So the crucial thing is that this week, I think it's true to say that Thursday is the last Thursday in the month this week.
Yep.
Which is the normal day on which Salford players are paid. So will they be paid this week? Who knows? There's still an awful lot of speculation about, which players will turn out for them, which players might refuse to turn out, and so on. I mean, there's quite a big problem at the moment with Dion Cross, who St Helens are wanting to sign. They've made Salford an offer, but Salford are not letting him go. But Dion Cross is apparently refusing to play for Salford. So, what's going to happen there? Who knows? Impossible to say, isn't it, really? So the whole thing is a hell of a mess when you look at it, unfortunately. And
at the moment, it's... Unless there's radical change, do you think that Salford are probably destined for demotion come the season's end?
Well,
because this impact on their grading can't be great, right?
Well, you would think not, but at the moment, I think the main concern for everybody is not so much what Salford will be doing next season, but whether they will, get to the end of this season. That's the point, and. They urgently need somebody to, they urgently need these new owners to, deliver the goods in terms of the financial, the money in the bank, so to speak. So who knows what that situation is like at the moment.
Because, if they were to all of a sudden pull out of the Super League season, it would have dramatic impacts on the broadcast agreement.
It would have enormous impacts, and it would it would make the next negotiation extraordinarily difficult, wouldn't it? So, we just can't afford to see that happening.
Yeah.
And the other clubs are loaning them lots of players, aren't they? And hopefully that if it's necessary to keep doing that, then hopefully that will keep happening. If you look at their team that played in France at the weekend, they got loanees from Johnny Vaughan from St Helens, Jake Thewlis from Warrington. They'd got Tiaki Chan from Wigan. They'd got anybody else? Harvey Makin from Wigan, George Hill from Castleford. So they had four clubs loaning them players for that game, and they're trying to persuade the RFL to allow them to take it. I think there's a limit, isn't there, on how many loan players you can have in a side, but they're trying to persuade the RFL to raise that limit, and I can't see any reason why the RFL wouldn't, but apparently they initially refused to do so, which seems absolutely bloody ridiculous to me.
And it's not as if they're asking for clubs' top players.
No. They're asking for players so they can keep going, and that's in everybody's interest. So, why the RFL would not accede to that request, I simply don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, mate. Now, I just want to touch on, we've got a pretty interesting readers' poll this week, and it's sort of off the back of how well Whitby's been playing. We've got a lot of great young stars in the competition at the moment. But yeah, I think it's about who's the best teenager in the league.
Yes, who's the best teenager in the league at the moment? Fletcher Rooney of Castleford, who's out injured at the moment, but had a great start to the season. Guillermo Asperubiche of Catalans Dragons. Logan Moy, who's doing very well for Hull FC. Harry Robertson of St Helens. George Whitby of St Helens. Harvey Smith of Wakefield, who I think's a potentially really top-class hooker. Aaron Lindop of Warrington Wolves, who's, again, out injured at the moment, but has put in some great performances. And young Jack Farrimond of Wigan. I mean, that's not a bad slate of teenagers, is it?
If you had to have an under-20s England side,
it wouldn't be so bad,
would
would
it?
it?
Lineup, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Who's your pick of that bunch, mate?
Well, at the moment, if you were just picking on the basis of the last weekend, I would say obviously George Whitby would be probably the number one pick. But I think you could vote for any one of those, and they would all be worth consideration. The problem for a lot of them is that they only get into the first team when somebody else is injured, whereas George Whitby has forced his way in without Jonny Lomax being injured. So, that's a real achievement from his point of view. But the same thing with Harry Robertson. Those two young Saints players. Harry Robertson's injured at the moment as well, but they look really terrific, don't they? By the way, I don't know whether you noticed, but after the Wigan St Helens game, Matty Peat, the Wigan coach, went up to George Whitby and congratulated him, and then had quite a bit of a discussion with him.
I saw that.
I'd be very worried if I was a St Helens fan.
Yeah.
I'm sure Matty Peat was, had no devious intention, but. It's sort of, given the sensitivity of relations between Saints and Wigan, you've got to be a bit on your guard.
You'd be saying, hopefully he wasn't saying, how would you like to come be a Wigan Warrior, mate?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I did see that, and they had a bit of a chat. Maybe he's just giving him some good advice. Who knows?
Well, that advice might be come to Wigan, but you never know what. Who knows?
That's right.
As I say, I'm sure it was perfectly in order.
Yeah, but we had an interesting poll last week as well that the results have come back for, mate, regarding what NRL involvement you'd like to see.
Yeah, 35.67%, that's just over a third of readers, said the NRL should have no role whatsoever in British Rugby League. On the other hand, 25.8%, which is just over a quarter, said the NRL should take total ownership and control of the British game. And all the other responses were sort of halfway houses. 15.3% of people said they should replace IMG as a consultant to the British game. 13.28% said that they'd should invest money into the game but not exclusively control it or manage it, which is probably wishful thinking, really. And then 9.94%, just under 10%, said the NRL should manage the game but not own it, which is probably, that's the least popular response, but that's the one that might end up being what actually happens, I think. The NRL to manage the game but not own it, or at least not own it totally.
Yeah.
There's been talk about them buying a third interest in the game, 33%. But, the Super League clubs have formed a working party to open negotiations with the NRL. But before they do that, they need to decide themselves what it is they want from the NRL. I mean, obviously financial support, but what would they be prepared to see the NRL do that isn't being done at the moment? That's the key.
And I think for the NRL, the incentive isn't money. Like, it's not for them to get a profit out of it. I think the incentive is to grow the game internationally, build an even stronger competition up here to, make the game of rugby league stronger as a whole across the whole globe.
Absolutely. Well, they want to bundle TV rights, don't they? That's apparently what they're trying to do. And they've really cozied up to DAZN after DAZN bought Foxtel, and they're obviously, I think, trying to persuade DAZN to make a bid for rugby league in both hemispheres, presumably, which will be to our advantage, of course, if that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, other news, mate. Joe Ofahengaue has signed with the Leeds Leopards. I believe he'll be making his way over very shortly, if he hasn't already, because it's for the rest of the season, I believe.
Absolutely,
yeah, a good impact player for them.
Oh gosh, yes, and just strengthens them, doesn't it? It's an opportune time to be signing a player like that when you've had a good start to the season. You're consolidating your challenge. You're still in the Challenge Cup. It's the semi-finals coming up fairly soon, and you're obviously challenging for a playoff place in Super League. Yet, oddly enough, Leigh are not mentioned as one of the clubs that should be in an NRL Super League if the NRL takes over. So that seems very odd, doesn't it, to me? But anyway, I mean, Leigh are going in the right direction in every sense. They had almost 10,000 people there at the weekend to see them play Warrington. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to seeing them selling out some games at the Leigh Sports Village.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making a real fan experience there.
Absolutely,
I think, all clubs could learn a lot from Leigh. Now, the other news, mate, Mikey Lewis, he admitted in a podcast, I believe it was, with Sky Sports, that he does have interest in going over to the NRL at some stage, whether that's sooner or later.
Well, he was saying he's a great fan of the NRL. He watches a lot of NRL games, and if you do, and you're a top player over here, who wouldn't be interested in going over there to experience the NRL? The NRL does seem to be booming, doesn't it? And, the crowds are going up at many of their clubs. I think the total crowd at the weekend was something like, what was it? 220,000 or thereabouts from 8 matches, which is an average of almost 30,000 a game. That's just something we could only dream about over here, isn't it? Apart from anything else, we don't have stadiums that are big enough to hold those sorts of crowds, and obviously heavily influenced by the 65,000 who were there at Accor on Friday. Yeah. But, the Bulldogs are an interesting side, aren't they? Because when they are performing well, as they are now, they draw massive support throughout Western Sydney.
It was great to see a packed crowd over in New Zealand as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
See the Broncos go down to the Warriors in Golden Point.
Golden Point. What did you think about that? Gosh,
shattered, mate.
Yeah, I mean, to kick off Golden Point and to kick off dead and concede a penalty. Reece, not a great thing for Reece Walsh to do, was it?
It was a great penalty goal from Luke Metcalf.
It certainly was, yes.
Yeah. Now, other news, mate. We touched on it a lot last week, but Lachlan Galvin, it looks like he's been named in the Tigers lineup for this weekend after being dropped to New South Wales Cup following all that off-field drama.
Well, they've got to make up, haven't they? At West Tigers, I watched the game on Monday at Parramatta, and I thought they played extremely well actually without Galvin. But they were very unlucky. They got a sin bin at a crucial time in the game that looked very harsh to me. A supposed hip drop tackle that wasn't a hip drop tackle as far as I was concerned. And then Parramatta zipped in for some tries while, Wests were down on numbers. But you can't, if you've got a player like Lachlan Galvin, you can't keep him out of the first team, can you, really, forever? And I think everybody has to learn from what's happened. We talked about Galvin last week with John, and, the fact is that he'd been critical of Benji Marshall, but some people are saying that, those comments were not public comments, but were made privately, but were then repeated, which sort of shows you need to be very careful about who you speak to when you make derogatory comments about someone. But, the kid is a really great player, potentially, and I think they will be a better team with him in the side rather than out of it. And they've done well this season. They've got 6 points from 6 games, 3 wins and 3 defeats. And, I think, actually 6 points from 7 games now after Monday's result. But nonetheless, they're doing a lot better than in recent years. But they need to, keep up that progress, don't they? And they obviously think they're better with Galvin in it. They play Cronulla this Sunday at home, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
And if you look at him, his impact on the team, what his contract value currently is, I think he's only on $300,000 a season at the moment. We spoke earlier about Gary Hetherington saying that you want players playing above their worth. If they could get him to buy in for the rest of this season and next season, which at this stage probably looks a bit unlikely, but if they could, it gives the Tigers the flexibility to sign other good players around him.
No doubt at all.
Because he's obviously playing, well above his current contract. And you look, if they can make some good signings, keep him in the team for next year, there's no reason why they can't be a contending side.
No, none whatsoever. No.
August, September.
And I mean, the thing is, a lot of people say, well, is Benji Marshall a good coach or not? Well, who knows? But, he's actually getting the side to play well this year, I think. And, it's very difficult because you don't know what goes on inside a club, do you? So you can't comment with any authority about coaches, really. Yeah. Or we can judge them on his results. That's right. It's not going too badly for them. But it was interesting in the NRL at the weekend because, Parramatta got off the bottom of the table with beating West Tigers, and the Panthers, who had a horror season so far, they had a really convincing win against the Roosters, didn't they?
Yeah.
So the sides at the bottom are starting to fire a bit, and it makes it just such an interesting competition, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look back last year, the season before, if you had told me, in 2025, the bottom, 4 teams this many weeks into the season would be Parramatta, Roosters, Panthers and Knights, I would have told you were dreaming. But,
absolutely.
It's very good to see those bottom teams starting to be competitive.
It is.
And see some
I just wish the Gold Coast Titans would start being more consistent. They're my favourite side in the NRL.
Yep.
And I thought they got off to a great start. They had a great win at the Roosters. But at the weekend they lost at home to Canberra, and Canberra are third in the league. They keep punching above their weight to Canberra, don't they?
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. And maybe it's all those good English players they're signing.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you never know. They might be signing a few more. We've mentioned Mikey Lewis, of course.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Jamal Fogarty looks like he could be leaving, so maybe they'll come and target Lewis. We'll see.
Absolutely. And the other bit of news from from the NRL this weekend is that Dominic Young has been dropped by the Roosters, which is, not great news from an English point of view.
They've gone for Mark Nwangani-Tawasi.
I'm so glad you said that, so I don't have to say his name.
Yeah.
I just can't say it. But yes, I mean he's been a revelation since coming over from rugby union. I think he looks a really good player, and so Dominic's out of the side, and that's disappointing, though, isn't it? From our point of view, from an English perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, you can't imagine he'll be out of the side for long.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so, but who knows? Yeah, because I mean, Mark has been playing at centre, hasn't he? But obviously he's Trent Robinson has reorganised his backs.
Yeah, and they've got Billy Smith playing in the centres too. He had a really good game the weekend before last. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. Any other news you want to touch on, mate, before we look at this weekend's matchups?
No, I don't think so. Just to mention, having said no, but yes, interesting that the Championship, Halifax lost their unbeaten record with a 12-8 home defeat against Bradford in front of almost 5,000 spectators, and there was a very tight 10-all draw at Widnes, between Widnes and Oldham, and Hunslet got off the mark at Batley Bulldogs. Hunslet got their first win of the season, 28-24 at Batley, which was a bit of a shock, really. And then in League One, Midlands Hurricanes playing North Wales Crusaders. They lost their unbeaten record in Birmingham, which was interesting to see. And Gould Vikings, the new club, got off the mark with their first league win at Keighley, which was quite amazing. If you'd said that at the start of the season, that would have been a hell of a shock, wouldn't it, really?
Absolutely. It's good to see plenty of good contests in the Championship and League One. And
absolutely.
Yeah. It was only a matter of time before someone challenged Halifax, I guess. And,
yes, yeah, well, but
it's still a tight game, though. It's not as if they got...
No, Bradford have a very strong squad, a much stronger looking squad than Halifax. But Halifax obviously gave them a really great game, and it was obviously a well-supported game as well.
Absolutely. All right, mate, let's take a look at this weekend's matchups. Starting on Thursday night, we have Warrington taking on St Helens, which should be a really good game.
Yes, and you've got to back St Helens to win this one because of Warrington's problems at halfback at the moment. Presumably, Sam Burgess will stick with Danny Walker as the partner for Mark Sneed. And, against the, Whitby and Wellesby, who will presumably play at halfback for St Helens, I don't see them being able to, get a win, unfortunately. But you never know. Warrington need to start winning. They're 9th in the league now, 2 points outside the top 6, and they can't really afford to lose that many more games if they're going to keep in touch with the top 6. It's been a disappointing year for them so far. But the trouble with Warrington is every year's a disappointing year, isn't it? In a sense, and just when you think that they've got everything primed so that they can come through and win trophies, something goes wrong, and obviously the latest thing is this George Williams injury. It's a disaster for them, really.
Yeah, no, the sooner he can get back, the better for Sam and Warrington. Friday's matchup, we have Leeds taking on Ofahengaue.
Well, that looks a really interesting game, doesn't it? Fortunately, that's a Sky game shown on one of the main Sky channels. And, gosh, I find that hard to predict. I think... would I be daring enough to tip Leeds? I'm not quite sure. I think it's a game that could even go to Golden Point, if I'm really honest about it. I'd say Ofahengaue probably by a very, very fine margin, Jake, and there'll be a lot of Ofahengaue fans making the journey to that game, filling the Western Terrace. and it's a game to really anticipate, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I expect that one to be a very close one as well. On Saturday, we have 3 matches. We've got Huddersfield taking on Castleford.
Well, 2 teams have only got 2 points, so... Well, no, Huddersfield haven't got any points, have they? I'm mistaken there. But this is a chance for one of these teams to start trying to climb up, put their early season misery behind them. I think, given Huddersfield's injury situation and Castleford's recent acquisition of loan players to shore them up in the middle, if Castleford play like they did at Wakefield, I think they'll probably win this game.
Yep. The other matchups, we have Salford taking on Leigh.
Well, only one result here, I'm afraid. And again, we don't know yet what the Salford team is going to be. But, I'd imagine Leigh would win by at least 30 points.
Yep. The third and final matchup on Saturday, we have Catalans taking on Wakefield.
Well, both of these teams are just outside the top 6 in 7th and 8th position. And the winner may well go into the top 6, depending on results elsewhere. I'm still not convinced by Catalans, actually. And I think Wakefield might sneak a victory here.
Yep.
I'd stick my neck out and say they might. Obviously, that they might not thank me for saying that, but I think Wakefield's away form has been very, very good this year, and I think they might just be strong enough to grab a win.
So there'll be a few Wakefield fans heading down for that one.
I'm sure there will be. Yes, I'd love to join them.
And Sunday's matchup, mate, another big one. Hull FC taking on Wigan.
Well, Hull are really struggling for forwards. They've, if you looked at Hull's team against Hull KR on Good Friday, they had a second row partnership of Zach Hardacre and Ed Chamberlain. And I think both players have picked up knocks. So I'm not quite sure who they're going to have in their pack to face Wigan. Wigan came over to Hull, I think it was the second game of the season, and put 46 points on Hull. And everybody thought, oh, this is just like last year. Since then, Hull have been a revelation. But I think it's absolutely ridiculous to be repeating a fixture in round 9 that was actually a round 2 fixture. Absolutely ridiculous. Who on earth puts a fixture list together? I'm not so sure, but this is crazy. But I think Wigan will win comfortably because I just think they've got a very strong side with some injuries, but not overwhelmingly so, and I think they'll be far too strong for Hull, unfortunately.
We're seeing it in the NRL as well at the moment. The amount of teams that have played each other twice already.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I don't know who's doing these fixtures, but
no, they ought to be shot as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you're having loop fixtures, the loop fixtures should come at the start and then at the end. Keep them apart.
Yeah, and I don't know, with the way the Challenge Cup falls these days, it's unpredictable who you're going to face in that.
Yes,
so you could be playing a team 3 times.
Well, Warrington and St Helens. This will be their third game. Once in the league and once in the Challenge Cup.
Yeah. Oh, well, mate. Maybe one day we'll get it right. Until then.
Yeah. I mean, I've offered to do the fixtures for the RFL or RL commercial, but who knows? One day they might take me up on that offer. You never know.
Yeah, if you do it for free, maybe.
Well, that'd be the trouble, wouldn't it? Yeah.
All right, mate. Unless there's anything else you want to touch on, we might wrap it up here.
No, that's fine.
We'll remind our viewers and listeners, if you do want to get your copy of League Express, you can head to totalrl.com/shop and we'll put the QR code up on the screen.
That'll be great.
And most stores in the north, most news agencies, it'll be there. I saw it in Sainsbury's the other day down the road.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
good,
they had it down there. So
good
to see, mate.
Hopefully you bought all the copies.
Oh, mate, no, there was only a few left, mate. So everyone else was leaving it up to everyone else to buy.
Good,
them,
okay.
All right, mate. We'll end it here and do it again next week, eh?
That's great. Thanks, Jake. Cheers, mate.